Welcome to Resisting Beta, the men's health podcast. And now, your host, Andrew Bonce. All right, men, welcome to another episode of the Resisting Beta podcast. I am Andrew Bonce, your host, and we are here with Joe Crammond. And here are some questions I have for Joe today that you might have too. So what are the 1% moments in life that keep us really where we're at, looking up at everybody else who's winning on the podium? Like, they have the medals, we just have a sad, pouty face, and we're watching other people win. What is those teeny tiny moments that they got right and we didn't? What does actually peak performance mean? How does it how does it translate into winning in life if we're not a professional athlete or something like that? A few other questions is, how do you embrace fear and use it as motivation? And how do our insecurities cause us to remain stuck where we're at in that stuck mindset? And what would it look like if we were able to overcome those insecurities? What could our life look like? So a little bit about Joe. He's actually the head of business development at a company called Pickle. And he's a man of many talents. He's a dedicated competitive bodybuilder. This guy's jacked. If you check him out on Instagram, he's a peak performance coach and an entrepreneur. And he shares my passion for entrepreneurship, and he has a love for competitive bodybuilding. This guy can move some weight around a little bit, and he's dedicated his life to pushing the limits of what's possible, both in the gym and in the business world. So I really appreciate you being here, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. That's a great introduction, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. So, Joe, tell us a little bit about why you're excited to be here in front of the men of Resisting Beta.
What I understand, obviously, there's a lot of men struggling these days, and I've been through my struggles growing up. My mother was an alcoholic, chronic alcoholic. Unfortunately, she passed away from liver cirrhosis when I was young, when I was in my mid-20s, and I'm 39 now. And my father had me late in life. He was 59 years of age when he had me, so I was a young boy looking after an old man. So I grew up with a different generation. He was actually a POW in the Second World War as well. He was born in 1923, I believe, and different values and a traditional way of looking at things. And he taught me a lot about how to get through struggle, obviously going through the generational changes he would have done in the UK, especially during the war and post-war. Things are very different, and men didn't have the ability to be able to talk about their feelings back then like they do so much now. It wasn't as encouraged, but they still managed to carry on. And I think that it's becoming far more important for people to open up and have these conversations, and that's one of the reasons why I'd like to be able to add some value to your show.
Thanks, man. So tell me a little bit about the journey, maybe of the Reader's Digest version, because we could probably tell your story the whole episode here, on kind of some points of transformation, maybe over, obviously you're a competitive bodybuilder right now, so that didn't happen overnight. Have you always been jacked and ripped, or is that something? Why did that journey start, and how does it play into kind of who you are as a man today?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And when I was younger, I was very insecure and shy. So when I was a teenager, I wasn't particularly bullied at school, but I was one of the quiet kids in school. I didn't really want to speak to many people, had a lot of inner issues with just having anxiety around people because of my mum's alcoholism and the unstable environment at home. But when I got to 17, I offered a job in a gym. So that was my first job taken. It was in a leisure centre, so I had a gym within that. And I don't know, over time, I just started training, and that just gave me more and more confidence because people were approaching me in a different way. They were seeing my body transform. And I think with that sort of interaction, it just gives you more social confidence. And I met a guy who was an ex-professional bodybuilder as well from Poland. He worked as a KP in the kitchen, and he actually took me under his wing. And he looked like Dolph Lundgren out of the Rocky films, with a blonde flat top, and huge 6'4" guy. And he gave me some dietary advice. I started training with him in one of the local gyms. Not the gym I was working at, because I didn't quite have the equipment needed, to be honest, to get to the level he wanted to push me to. And that spurred me on to then do my first competition, which was when I was 19 years old. And I actually came second in the nationals for the juniors at that time as well, the under-21s. And that just gave me such a big boost in confidence. Obviously, the genetics played a part. I had a reasonably good bone structure, but it was more about sticking to a routine and a structure of good nutrition and just having that solid structure of training hard, as hard as I can, but blasting my body 5 days a week with the exercises he was showing me. So that, if it wasn't for that and working in the gym and actually training that hard and eating those foods and dedicating my life to that one discipline, if I'm honest, it would have been very difficult to get over the anxiety and the nervousness that I had as a younger man. So that was the beginning part of the journey.
So now you're almost 40, right? I saw on your Instagram that you're ramping up your training again and you start working to get back into competition shape for next year. Is that right?
That's the plan, yeah. So I came second to Mr. Britain in 2015. I won the Mr. Midlands Pro-Am show for NABO, which is the National Amateur Bodybuilding Association. Yeah, I won a few other regional shows for the southwest of the UK as well. But my last competition, I split up with my ex-partner, and one of the reasons why that happened is because I was selfish. I dedicated my life to the sport. I wasn't paying her the attention that she felt she deserved, and it's a hard job being in a relationship with someone who's a extreme athlete, I think, with any sport, and because you have to be selfish to win. You really do. It's very difficult to find balance, especially when you've constantly got the imposter syndrome in your mind of, am I good enough? Am I going to be the best shape I can be on stage? So you're just so laser focused on yourself that you tend to can neglect, which is one piece of advice I would say. If people are considering competing, don't neglect the people closest to you that are supporting you, because if you lose them, it makes things very, very difficult. And that's why I gave up for a while competing, because of that relationship breakup. So I decided to take a step back and focus on other things. And bodybuilding is not cheap. It costs quite a bit of money with the supplements and the food and everything else. I was more interested in trying to make some money and turning it into a bit of a business.
So most of the men listening to this episode aren't bodybuilders or even aspiring bodybuilders. I would imagine most of them lift weights or think they should lift weights. So have you learned from your experience in bodybuilding, and what is some advice that you can share with the men that maybe not using the direct skill set from like the discipline to get into competition-based shape, but just on moving them from stuck in their life to a better version of themselves? What advice would you have for a guy like that?
I would say take the small steps first. The simple things like getting out of bed and making your bed in the morning, having a cold shower. It doesn't have to be a fully structured routine straight away, but it's just taking those small steps makes a massive difference. And the fact that even if they're nervous about going into the gym, just make that effort to do it, even if you're just not lifting as much as you expect you would, or you're worried about being watched. Like, everyone's there for the same reason. They're all there to either, put on size, get fit, but they're not really looking at each other. People always are very self-conscious when they go to a gym. But even if it's not a gym and they want to go out for a jog, always do something, stay active, because as you're aware, Andrew, being a man, we've got to be physically active. And if we're not, and we're very sat around not doing much, it can really cause a lot of mental health problems as well. So I think that it helps to just stay active and just make small steps. And over time, those steps will increase to bigger accomplishments if you want them to. That's the only sort of advice I can give, really, for people in that position.
So just to take those small steps and just focus on starting to build that discipline. It sounds like you think the utmost importance to start getting some momentum, whether it be getting stronger or leaner, or honestly doing anything in life that I feel like that can be applied. If you're starting a business, you're trying to save money, you're trying to reduce a certain habit or unhealthy habit like drinking too much or smoking or video games or whatever.
This is it. Yeah.
That could apply, right?
That's it. Yeah. It's just looking at what you're doing in life that's toxic that you can reduce over time.
So what you did to put you up on those podiums were the other men sitting in the crowd looking at you that tried to do the same thing? Like, what was the X factor? What do you attribute that to? You
mean the judging side of it, when you're being judged by the panel and by the crowd?
No, like the men that you beat. It made you difference from, you were all striving to be up to win the gold or win first place. You were up there, they weren't. What was the difference?
That's an interesting question. I think there's many people in the crowd, but it depends on their lifestyle. If you've got children, I haven't got any children. I think if you've got a lot of responsibilities, having a balance is important. I was in a fortunate position that I could just focus on that. and it was getting me through the issues I had when I was younger, and I became a little bit addicted to it, if I'm honest. Whereas people that were watching, they don't always want to aspire to be that guy on stage, because it's not really a healthy lifestyle. It's very, very stressful on your body when you're getting to that percentage of body fat and you're putting your body through what it needs to be, winning shows or even coming top 3 or top 6 on a stage. And also it's the mental aspect of being judged by a panel by every inch of your physique being picked to pieces, basically. And you only have to do the slightest thing wrong and you've got a whole audience that are watching you. It's quite a tough thing. So it's not for everyone. But yeah, it's a difficult one, because I wouldn't say that I was any better than the guys watching me in the audience that were out of shape. It doesn't really work like that, because some of those people may have other areas of their lives that are far more fulfilled. At the time, I just sacrificed everything to do that thing. So it depends how much you want something and how badly you want it, I guess.
What were some of the few things that you mentioned of fear of judgment and imposter syndrome are things that I'm sure you felt in your experience in professional bodybuilding, and I'm sure you probably feel them in other places too. How have you navigated those today and in the past to move past them?
It's taking yourself out of your comfort zone. So you've got to do it. You've got to feel uncomfortable to grow. That's what I honestly believe that. I think no matter what it is, you've got to be made to feel like you're not good enough to give you the motivation and frustration to push yourself to be good enough. So if you just stay in the comfort zone all the time, never challenging yourself, you're going to struggle to really grow in life, because you've got to go through that pain. It's like progress demands sacrifice, in my opinion. And it pays off. As much as it hurts at the time to feel like you're not worthy or you're not good enough to do something, once you make that first step and you keep doing it, even if you don't achieve the top level, you've done more than a lot of people have, because most people are quite happy to sit around and not do anything and have things handed to them or have it as easy as they can get away with. So that's the only thing I can really say, is it was something that I just did through force rather than being told to do it, and it made a massive impact and a huge difference in my life.
Where do you think that discipline came from? It was one of the things I learned in my life is most of my life, as in my adult life, I would say I'm not a very disciplined person. And then all of a sudden I went through my divorce and I looked at a bottle of bourbon on the top of the fridge and I was just like, I just want to get smashed. I want to get hammered. I want to numb it. And for some reason I didn't. And I was like, what if I use this pain for good? And I had this idea of waking up before sunrise for 100 days in a row and journaling. Relatively simple, but I was like, holy crap, I'm doing it. And I documented the whole journey on Facebook and Instagram to makeshift accountability partner. And then I worked out for 100 days in a row after that, because I was like, okay, let's see what I could do for fitness. And then I stopped. And then my discipline muscle got lazy. And then I started up again, my discipline muscle this year, and results are coming in more of my business and podcasting world. So what were some of those moments for you when now that you're getting back into the swing of things, or maybe as you look back on your life?
Yeah, it's all about goal setting, as you say. The journaling is a great idea. I'd recommend that for anyone, to write down their thoughts and feelings, and also write down what they want out of life, where they want to be in 1 year or 5 years from now. I think when I was a boy, I grew up watching the old school action heroes like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone and Jean-Claude Van Damme and people like that, and they were all big, muscular chaps. And I aspired to look like that, so I did a lot of research into how they trained, their mindset. So I suppose in a way I did have idols, and I think sometimes that helps if you've got somebody you aspire to want to be or have their lifestyle. It helps that sort of drive to have somebody who's achieving what you want to achieve. So it's not necessarily unhealthy to not even necessarily compare yourself, but just to have somebody there is an inspirational drive point. It can be somebody in the family as well. It could be somebody that's been very successful in business. It could be a close friend, but someone that you can think of that you really are looking at and thinking, you know what, I want a piece of their pie. I want something that they're doing and I can achieve it, because if they can do it, you can do it. So I guess that's the good starting point.
I like that, because I just had a guest on the podcast a couple of weeks ago named Marcus Murphy, and he had talked about a couple spheres of people in your life. That the sphere of people that you look at, that you aspire to be, but you probably will never meet. Like, these are your heroes, the actors, the famous authors, that kind of stuff. And then there's the sphere of people that you spend your time with, your friends and your family and that kind of stuff. And you know, that saying, we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. But I think that there's different levels of that. And it sounds like one of those people for you, or a few of those people for you, were Arnold Schwarzenegger and a few other people. So have you found that to be true as you've reached towards the level of success that you've had, both in bodybuilding and obviously in your business too? You're an entrepreneur. Have you found the commonality there?
Oh, definitely. Obviously, I got Arnold Schwarzenegger's encyclopedia on bodybuilding, and I've looked at his life story and how he transitioned from, obviously, the bodybuilding world with pumping iron. I've watched that so many times, I've lost count, and then went into films and some of the greatest action movies of all time, and then into politics. So he's a businessman in his own right with property and things like that. So it's a pretty interesting journey when you look at people that get from their discipline in fitness and in sports, how they can turn that into other avenues of business as well. I think it's great to have a challenge. I think it keeps you on your toes. I think it keeps you feeling like you're alive if you've got something to strive for and a challenge. It doesn't have to be a big one, but it's something living. Living is the key.
Yeah. So you're a business development man, you're a busy guy. Like, how are you going to get through balancing all of that? And how do you typically get past the moments of I don't feel like it's, as you're moving towards competition next year? And obviously you're in great shape right now in your late 40s. What are some little tools or tips, or how do you do it, man? I'm sure you're just as tired as the rest of us, whether it be in the morning or the evening, or whatever you work out.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
What are some things that you can help the men with when we're I'm exhausted, work is this, family is this, all of these things, all these excuses coming in your mind? How do you navigate those in your life?
Yeah, some days are hard. A lot of it's to do with my nutrition. I try and keep my nutrition on point. Caffeine helps, if I'm honest with you. Lots of caffeine. That's one of the ways I do get through those tired days. But no, it's just setting a routine, really. I suppose I'm just so used to doing it. But for people that aren't into routines, I definitely think you should get one. I think getting the training done, or any sort of exercise first thing in the morning, is very important, because your testosterone levels are they're highest, as you probably are aware. You train on an empty stomach. Yeah, and that's the best time to get it done. And at least it's done then. You can focus on the rest of the day. So try and get up as early as possible, rather than laying around, and don't let your alarm go off and go on to snooze, because then your brain goes into another sleep pattern again. They say there's some science behind it, but definitely don't hit that snooze button.
So you said nutrition on point. Tell me a little bit about what you mean by that.
So I stick to a low carbohydrate, high protein diet. I find it keeps my body clean, stops the sugar from building up too much in my arteries and in my blood. So I tend to keep down the carbs, not too low, but good complex carbohydrates, not dirty carbs. So no cheap meals. I try and avoid bread and sugar and gluten, if I'm honest, as well. Dairy, I keep that to a minimum. So it sounds boring, but I live on mostly beef and chicken and vegetables and whole grain rice. That's pretty much my stable diet. A lot of eggs as well. First thing in the morning, scrambled eggs. Well, after training, normally scrambled eggs, avocado and smoked salmon is my breakfast. And it can be quite cheap eating like that. You'd be surprised, people that are spending money on takeaways every week. It's fine to do once or twice as a bit of a cheat meal, but people rely on the fast food option as a convenience, don't they? But they don't realize that it's not cost effective. If you actually do spend a bit of time just prepping some food, it really does make a big difference.
That's one thing I've never done a really good job of, is food prepping. I don't eat out a lot. I'm a decent cook, and I cook most of my meals, but I try to keep it simple. I'm curious, just from a guy who is obviously really successful at it, what are some basic stuff that you do that set yourself up for success every single week when it comes to the nutrition side of things?
So I would definitely recommend getting an air fryer. Air fryers are so convenient. You just literally pop your chicken breast in, press a few buttons, you put some seasoning on the chicken or whatever meat you're into, and it will just be done within 20 minutes or so. And it keeps the juices in as well. And then just get some Tupperware boxes, get a big wok full of vegetables, cook your rice in there, and then just mix it up together, and don't overcomplicate things, and just have 3 or 4 Tupperware boxes per day. You can store some in the freezer. You can do it all on a Sunday, ready for the week, if you freeze some of the food as well. And it's just that preparation. You could spend 3 hours of a Sunday evening just prepping your food for the rest of the week if you haven't got time to do it during the week. But I tend to just do it each day. At the end of the day, I'll just prep for the next one. It makes it easier for me. And then obviously remember to always have a day off, because it is, eating like that can be, I think some people eat their feelings, I would say. That's the expression I use. So they don't really eat they don't look at their body as like a supercar. Think, you know what, if you had a Ferrari, you're not going to fill it full of dirty diesel and dirty fuel, gas, as you guys call it out there. You know, you're going to put clean stuff in to look after the engine, and our bodies are, if they're optimized, they'll look after us, look after it best you can. Think about what's going into your mouth.
That used to be, I started intermittent fasting probably 3 or 4 years ago, and it taught me 2 things. Number one, I ate because out of emotion way too often, or out of boredom. I felt sad, I felt overwhelmed, or I was bored, and I'm like, let's go eat. And it taught me, the second thing is it taught me that most of the time I was hungry, I was probably just thirsty, and I could do a lot more things with no food. Like, I work out fast in a fasting state. So it's cool that you said that work out on an empty stomach, because before I talked to my trainer, I was like, do I need to eat before I work out? They're like, no. It's like, do I have to have protein right after I work out? They're like, no. I was like, oh, okay. I can stay in a fasted state and work out in the morning, and a lot of times I don't eat until noon or 1 o'clock, and it works for me, but I enjoy it. It's allowed me to keep relatively stable on my weight as long as I'm consistent. And
it's good for your energy levels as well, and your focus.
Crap.
Yeah, exactly. The more the fuller your stomach, the blood's going there to digest it and everything as well. So it takes the energy away from everywhere else. It can really make you feel lethargic when you've got a full stomach. So I would always recommend eating small portions, but like you said, start midday and then small portions of food throughout, and fast between sort of 7 o'clock in the evening till, if you can do it, until midday the next day is very effective. Okay, Steve,
I think that for me, like, now I'm doing a lot more research about protein and how much protein I need to eat, because I'm 6'5", 240, right? So I guess that's probably around 100 and, I don't know, I think it was like 130, 140 grams of protein a day. It's a lot of freaking protein. I was like, how do I consume that? And how can I set myself up for that? And for me, I'm figuring it out, but it's not a perfect science. But when you look at your protein intake, do you gauge it off of, where do you find that number for you?
Yeah, so it was at 2 grams per kilo of body weight for me, because we use kilos. So it's like I was at 120 kilos, and it would be roughly 2 grams of protein. So yeah, you're looking at a lot of protein, like 230 grams a day is a lot. I was eating 6 meals a day at one time when I was on my off-season stage, because I was 123 kilos. Wow. I'm only 5'9", also a lot shorter than you as well. So I was heavy, very heavy.
Yeah. You guys, us Americans, have to go the different route and go off of Fahrenheit and pounds and everything. It just throws these conversations for a loop, because neither of us know how to do the calculations in our head. So, how have you used some of these things to improve in business? Like some of the things that you've learned and the discipline that you've learned from bodybuilding, and how has that carried over into our other areas of your life?
Well, I was told when I was competing that I needed to market myself to really make some money back from the money I was spending on the shows and on the supplements and the food. For sponsorship deals especially, I started learning social media marketing and digital marketing to be able to promote myself, create my own website at the time as well. And then I found from learning those skills, I was able to offer it to small local businesses, because people were asking me when I was going to get my hair cut, like, I saw your Instagram, I saw your stuff on Facebook. Can you help us promote what we do and get us some new customers? And I never really thought I would go into that route of actually helping businesses with their marketing, but that's the way it ended up going. So I set up my own agency, and I started hiring outsourced people to do some of the more complicated stuff. I started offering some SEO and some website development work as well, and paid traffic. And I looked at all the different ways that the marketing world, and it's always fascinated me anyway, how advertisers get people to buy their products. And obviously we live in a very consumer-driven age now. So you look at the clever marketing techniques of getting people over the line of purchasing stuff. It was always fascinated me. And the protein industry and the supplement industry is all about that, very competitive. So that's what got me into the marketing side, which has eventually led me into doing what I do now, which is helping business owners, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders speak on podcasts like we're doing and get that content out there to drive them more business and credibility online. So it's all sort of hand in hand worked along the same way. All about getting those free supplements, it shows. They're like, oh, you're not having that tub of protein. You haven't got enough followers on Instagram. It's like, oh, great. So the minimum of 10,000 to be given the green light to get your supplements shipped to you every week and all this sort of stuff. So it's a bit cutthroat, but I had to do it. And I cringed every time I had to stand in the mirror and take a selfie with a tub of protein in my hand or whatever I was doing. It was not my thing. I didn't like to do. Sometimes you just got to do what you need to do in that sort of industry.
Yeah, I think that there's some interesting carryovers here from imposter syndrome in the gym, or your experience of imposter syndrome, but also the imposter syndrome that the men who are listening to this, because most likely, I imagine, a man listening to this, he's successful in his career, he's got decades of experience doing it, and it's relatively easy for him, or for the most part. And he's a thought leader, but he might not. That might feel weird to call himself that. But when you've seen the journeys of people that you've worked with in your company and helped men go through this process, what sort of transformation have you seen, maybe for yourself because you lived it and did it for a long period of time, or maybe a few key stories of people that you've taken from just an expert in their field to then a thought leader, right?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because many people, when they first start speaking on podcasts or they have conversations on camera, they're terribly nervous. And a lot of the times they don't know what to say. They don't know how to articulate themselves. And it does take some work. But overall, when you spend more time doing it, it gives you better communication skills in life and it gives you more confidence to be able to have conversations outside of doing podcasts, which can really inspire people to want to listen to you. So it's a really valuable tool. And a lot of times now, I think, especially unfortunately with the youth of today, that they're glued to phones so much and they're not looking up and having a conversation with the person sat opposite or sat next to them on the bus or whatever's going on. Everyone is glued to a device. And I think the key communication skills of being able to look somebody in the eye and speak to them is going to be more valuable because people aren't going to be able to do it as much. So I think having that skill of just doing it on camera is still powerful because most people don't want to do it. They got their nerves hit them. So I think it's really good for your own self-confidence to just get out there and try it. Record yourself. You don't even have to put it out live or publish it. Just do it, see what you look like, see how you sound, and then eventually you can just improve on it if you feel like you need to as well.
And man, I think that there's so much commonality here to where the practice mindset, because you started off with kind of fitness training, starting to lift weights, and now practicing speaking, putting yourself in situations where you might look a little silly. You might look like an idiot. Your ego might be screaming at you saying, hey, this isn't your, stay in your lane. Don't go in the other one because that's uncomfortable. So that practice that as we get older, I was just having a conversation with another gentleman this morning about as we get older, the urge to not practice or the urge to not do things that are uncomfortable or that we suck at, it gets a lot harder and harder, especially because we stop doing it. We just focus on what we're good at and we ignore what we suck at. But this is such an interesting parallel from that because just practicing it. And I look back at my journey to where this all started was on TikTok, and I was just practicing on TikTok and me staring at my phone in my bedroom with a ring light. And the first, 15 or 20 were god awful, but nobody saw them. But eventually I was getting 1 million viewers from just a silly, goofy video of me just being myself and being authentically me and showing my goofy side. And I got a lot more comfortable just being articulate and also being a lot more comfortable putting myself out there without fear of judgment or knowing that there's going to be 1% of the people out there that just have such high of their own insecurities or so many of their own insecurities that they have to like vomit over somebody else to make themselves feel better. And that's on them. That's not me. That's all about them. That's nothing to do with me. So I like that this parallel that we're going down, because there is that practice mindset that if you don't adopt it, you're going to just stay where you're at. You're going to be status quo. You're going to be mediocre in maybe all phases of your life but one, whatever one you're willing to go out your comfort zone in. And it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, I also believe that maybe some of your listeners will have a lot of experience in business and in life that they can really offer value to people. That's what they forget. A lot of people think, oh, I couldn't do that. I couldn't get in front of, on camera, with a microphone in front of me talking about my journey. But they don't realize that story that they've got, and the multiple stories they've probably got as well, could really help inspire other people, especially if they've been through a lot of struggles and stuff like that, because not everyone's somebody who's successful. You'll think, oh, sometimes they might have had it easy, but they don't realize is what's gone on in their past that's made them resilient to be strong enough to determine to push them into being successful. It's always more often than a hero story from to success. So it's really valuable for people that have done well in business to speak about how and why they've got what they've got, I believe.
One of my favorite mentors, Ed Milet, talks about we're all capable and almost positioned really well to help the man or woman we were 5 years ago or 2 years ago. Like, we're just, and there are a lot of men going through the struggle. Like, I look at myself, where 5 years ago I was in a marriage where almost basically a sexless marriage, where I was the worst version of myself. I drank a lot. I was 260 pounds, not being my authentic self, couldn't show my authentic self to my wife at the time. And she resented me, and she should have, because I wasn't being who I wasn't being authentic. I wasn't leading myself and then leading in the relationship. I was allowing her to lead, and I was just being a passive, aggressive, using nice guy who was just doing what he thought was right, because that's what society taught me, to be a nice guy, but it was wrong. So now I'm on a mission to help like all those men who are that guy right now. So I think that there's a lesson here to where you're perfectly capable of helping a man who is a couple pages behind you in the book.
Definitely.
There's a lot of men that are probably there that would appreciate the fact that you're only 2 pages ahead, because there's so many of these high-paid experts who are 100 pages ahead or decades ahead, and they're really hard to relate to because they're so far ahead they can't necessarily go back to the granular steps that took them to get there. So I think there's this interesting movement of influence and thought leaders to where you really don't need the millions of downloads and millions of followers. Maybe you just need 100 true fans or 100 yous 2 years ago to make a difference in the lives of those people, right? So it doesn't have to be vanity metrics of followers who don't do anything except gawk. Maybe you could impact the lives of 100 people, and you could change the world with 100 people.
Exactly. Compound effect on that as well. Yeah. And also, it's just being the best version you can be for your community as well. It doesn't have to be online. You can always learn how to tell a story and be a thought leader within your own community and help people that are struggling. And that adds value to people's lives anyway. If they are people are going through some dark times, you'll always find somebody who's going through worse. And if you can just offer a helping hand to that person, especially the people that you see that are homeless, and especially in the US, if I understand, with vets and stuff that are homeless. And it's a big problem here in the UK as well. I always do what I can for charity if I can. People that are on the streets is becoming more and more of a problem. And it's a real shame to see. So that's all I could say to people that might be listening is you can always help somebody.
It's time to round out the episode here. So one of the things I ask every single man and woman that I've had on the podcast is 2 questions. The first one is, what does it mean to be a man to you, Joe?
Oh, that's an interesting one, especially nowadays. You're not going to be careful what you say on that, I guess. I think being the best version... Yeah, being the best... Being strong, and I don't just mean physically, I just mean it being strong for the people that love you and that care about you, and also being a support network for friends as well as family, and being reliable. Don't lie, just say it how it is, be true to yourself, as you said. Yeah, that to me makes a man what needs to be a man, I guess. So it's It's not just about the physical appearance, it's about having the mental strength and just being relied upon and being able to be relied upon when shit hits the fan, basically. That's all I can say. What do you think, Andrew?
So,
what's your take on that?
man, I get a different answer every single time. So I appreciate everyone's perspective, and I love the authentic viewpoint of you showing what it means. Because strong to a bodybuilder sounds one-sided, one-dimensional, right? But there's so many dimensions to it, right? There's the mental strength. There's the strength to know when to use your strength and when to be kind and when to be soft and when to let that strength down and open up your heart. There's the discipline and knowing when to use your strength, when you need to go to war to protect your shit, when you need to go to war to protect the ones that you love, when you need to go to war and protect yourself and stand up for yourself and lean in to a confrontational situation in a healthy and kind way, or in a way that sometimes you just got to break shit to survive.
Yeah.
Now,
exactly.
that's not going to happen for most people, but when there's somebody in trouble and you can either step up or you can be the person on the side of the street with their cell phone capturing somebody getting mugged on the side of the road, right? Like,
there's so much of that I see. It's shocking. Yeah, the way things are going now, just people just recording tragic things happening to people is unbelievable. It really is.
Yeah.
I would say as well, being an active listener is important. It's part of being not acting on emotion. Keep control of your emotions as best you can.
So I'm all about momentum. I'm all about creating baby steps or small chunks into getting some quick wins for the men. So I want you to put your professorial hat on and give the men some homework and break it down to, over the next 7 days, what is one simple thing that they can start doing in their life where they can start to get some quick wins based on the topics that we've talked about today? What would you say that they should do over the next 7 days to give them some momentum and some quick wins?
I would say get a journal, definitely. Start writing down goals of where you want to be and the kind of person you want to be 1 year from today that you're listening to this. Do I want to be happier? Do I want to be healthier, fitter, more successful, have a partner that loves me and I love them, be in a better relationship, whatever it might be? Write that goal down. And then the baby steps would be creating a structure in your life of order as well. Stay tidy. Keep your workspace and your life space around you tidy, because most people that are going through hard times, they struggle to pick up the socks on the floor or the crisp packets on the side, and they don't make their bed, and they just leave things laying around, and that sort of stuff can make things worse. So try and keep things in order and tidy. And that's exercise would be another one. I would say it doesn't have to be a gym, but I would say make sure that you get up first thing in the morning, at least go for a walk outside. Start to realize that we're not meant to be trapped in the four walls, and there is a massive amount of nature out there to be explored. Breathe in the fresh air, look at the trees, realize that there's a big world out there and that things aren't always as bad as you might think they are, being trapped in four walls and overthinking things all the time. And I think just doing those simple steps that I've given there over the course of 7 days, if you do them every day, that you'll feel a lot better at the end of that week, and it will just go and compound from there. So that's the main tips I can hand out at the moment.
There's some gold there, brothers. So, Joe, I'll add your Instagram and your website in the show notes. It sounds like Instagram's the best way to reach out to you. I'll add your screen name in the show notes. Is there any other places that you suggest men reach out to you on besides Instagram?
They can add me on Facebook. So Joe Crammond, Cramond. You'll probably see it on the screen. More than happy to accept friend requests on there. And obviously, if there is any men that are in business that wish to start a journey of thought leadership, or even just starting to tell their story and getting out in front of the right audience, maybe you're somebody who's been through some struggles yourself and you wish to help others on similar sort of podcasts, you can reach us on podcastguestingpro.com or at pickle.com, but it's spelled Pikal, pickle.com, and that's the company that I consult for. Yeah, we can help you with that one.
Hey, man, I appreciate that. I'll add that to the show notes so you guys can stay in touch with Joe. Joe, I just want to take a second and honor you for the man that you are and for the times that you have gotten through when that little voice in your head is telling you to quit and telling you that you're not enough and telling you that all of the excuses that you could come up with to not do the right thing, and you doing the right thing over and over again for a long period of time, because I know that the men are greater for hearing your story and hearing the simple tips that you share today. And I just want to honor you for all of the work that you've invested in your life and the ripple effect that you're having at this moment right now and what you have done in the past. So I appreciate you.
No, thank you, Andrew. That's massively appreciated. That's really kind of you to say. And hopefully what we've talked about today can help a few people as well. That's the main thing. So it'd be nice to get some feedback if we have. So
awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Joe.
No worries, Andrew. You take care. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Resisting Beta podcast. Here's where I need your help. I'd love for you to give us a review on your favorite podcast player. Also, follow us on TikTok and Instagram and share this message out to a man that needs to hear it, because that's how we impact this world. Thank you very much. Make it a great day, men.